Christmas time is like a very special time in church, isn't it? And the family and the kids, and that just makes it feel so much more special. Okay, I'm just going to put these over here. Just because we've got our kids in church today. And nothing like a few incentives to keep everybody's attention in place, hey? Hey, Lauren. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Ashley. Sure, everyone's listening now, aren't they? Okay, so I want to share the scripture today. The message today is a message of peace, and it's a very typical scripture that we talk about around Christmas time. And I've got a few things I just want to share on that. So if you could put that scripture up, it's Isaiah 9 verses 6. Ooh, I'm going to find my notes. So, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. The Prince of Peace. And so the message today is a message of peace. I'm just going to put these over here because they're taking up too much space. So a child has been born for us, and a son has been given to us. And that speaks about there's such simple lines right there, but they speak about the forgiveness of sins and the presence of God, and a child has been born for us. That you can leave that scripture up, but just because I'm going to keep looking at it and talking to it, but that child's been born for us. That speaks about God's humanity, God coming to earth, God in that human form. The Word became flesh, and he dwelt among us. And you might say that God doesn't understand what I'm going through right now. God's never experienced some of these things that I'm experiencing, and he doesn't understand. But God understands, because he's been through pain and suffering. He's been through isolation. He knows about rejection. He's been wounded. So whatever God's experienced, whatever we're experiencing, God's experienced. And the Son has been given to us. That Son speaks about the Son of God, that divinity, that's God. And it speaks about us belonging to something. It speaks about us growing. As a son, you grow in the house, and you grow up and you become full of stature, and the Bible speaks about growing in stature and favor, and it speaks about inheritance, and it speaks about growth. So for to us a child is born, and to us a son is given. But he was born for us to be reborn, and he was given so that we could, his sonship has allowed us to be called sons of God. And this is quite a sobering thought when that reality finally does hit home. I've had a God experience in my life where that just totally broke me. And I want to read something here out of the book of Luke, and Luke 7 verses 36. Jesus is anointed by a sinful woman, and as we have kids here today, I'll let you explain to your children what that sinful woman is. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came with an alabaster jar of perfume, and she stood behind him at his feet weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair and kissed them and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, and that she is a sinner." Okay. And Jesus answered them, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Okay, I'm not going to go into that, but that just explains how much they were forgiven, how much she received. And that woman was broken as she came in. And they say that bottle of perfume cost a year's wages as well. Beautiful, Bailey. Just, it's amazing what you see from the front here. So that woman's response is what I want to talk about, is that, Jesus was eating amongst the Pharisees who, they're a little bit mean-spirited, a little bit religious. They're very good at ticking all the boxes and doing all the right things, but they hadn't experienced what this woman experienced. She came through there, and she she had let Jesus touch her. And she pours that perfume out, and they get upset because Jesus is associating with the sinful woman. His treasurer gets upset because she's poured out all this perfume that could have been spent on the poor. And the Pharisees get angry at that, and the treasurer gets angry, but Jesus just receives this worship and explains that the woman has had a revelation of who Jesus is and that what he saved her for. And that's that example of worship, that posture of her coming down low and worshiping God at his feet, that example of, giving a generous sacrifice, something of value, and that example of just being totally broken and thankful for what God's done is probably one of the best examples of worship in the Bible, and we can be grateful if we can ever come close to just experiencing what that means, live a life with that gratitude. Those religious leaders, they had an attitude of just being, just ticking those boxes. They were mean-spirited, and they had no idea of what of what that woman was experiencing right there, and they were in the room with her. She knew God, and she knew that she was forgiven of her sins, and that she was in God's presence right there. And that is the peace of God. When you know that you're forgiven, when that weight has been lifted off of you, and you're in the presence of God, what more do you really need? Because in the next part of the scripture it says, and the government will be on his shoulders, and that just talks about that total authority, that overall responsibility being with God. And when she was in that presence, she was in that moment, she knew that God was responsible. He had taken control of her life that had just gone totally out of control. And that's like for all of us, I think we all have some sort of responsibility in our lives, whether we're parents, whether we have a job that's demanding of us, whether we have a family that we're responsible for, there's relationships we're responsible for. We got things that we're passionate about, and at some point that tension is going to grow and it's going to become big, and we're going to have to deal with that tension, and that's just totally unavoidable. You're not going to get through life with having a meaningful life anyway without having some sort of pressure. I have pressure in my job, and I enjoy my job. I like my job, but there's pressure. I have clients that get angry with me. They get so angry, and they want to fight, and we have these discussions. But it's all a lot of fun, and at the deep down I do enjoy what I do. But I'm just trying to explain that there is that tension in our lives there, and it's unavoidable. So, if I had to wait for life to be perfect, I would probably never have had 3 kids. I wouldn't have had a Noah and a Joseph and a Bailey. It just wouldn't have happened. It doesn't. If you wait at some point, you just got to dive in, hey Murray, and just decide, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to use what I got and go for it. You can't wait for it to all get perfect, Malaka. It's not going to. When you got money and you got the house and you got the car and everything, it's I think life's over then. By the time you get to that point. But so you're going to dive in at some point, and you're going to use what you've got, and you're going to go for it, and you're going to have pressure. But I think what I'm just trying to say is that when you're under that authority, under that government of God that he talks about there, and your values start to line up with his values, that's the real submitting to God, And when you submit to God like that woman did in that situation, she can breathe again, because she knows that in this realm, in this world, God is in control. And so I think we should let that example of Mary Magdalene be an example for us, where she found the time to rest in him. She puts her attention on God for that moment, She seeked him out and she found him. And she brought the things that were valuable to her and put them at his feet, and worshipped him with that. And those things can be our prayers and our tears, things that are really valuable to us. We need to bring them to God and let him work through them and create some space for God to do something in our lives. And when we come with that simplicity and that purity, then we can ask God for things like that we can't achieve on our own. For our kids, they might be asking for a PlayStation 4, that is totally out of reach for them, but they can speak to their dad who knows what's best for them, and and he can answer their prayers, you know. You can dream out of the box when you come to God like that. You can create your wish list of things that seem out of reach for you. You can be honest with areas that you're weak in as well. When you create that time to be with God, there's areas that we weaken, and that's discipleship, you know. God's pointing something out that's the next thing for you to deal with. And you can put that aside and just get busy with life, or you can actually press in and take hold of, you know, the next thing, just being obedient to the next thing that God's got for you. You know, the pressure we can't avoid, but knowing how faithful God has been to us in the past, He's good to us, we know that the peace that comes with that is equally unavoidable. Okay? So we know that that pressure's there, and we're going to get caught in that place of tension because there's things that we're passionate about, there's things we want to achieve. But we know that God's been there before. And this is peace to us, is that we know that we've been forgiven, and we know that we can rely on the presence of God. Okay? That's the peace. We know that He's overcome the world, and by overcoming the world, He's already created that space where if we lean into Him, that we can receive that forgiveness and we can experience His peace. And that's just a short, beautiful Christmas message for you today.